For several years after Hurricane Katrina, top brass for the Army Corps of Engineers consistently told major media that New Orleans officials should bear some of the blame for the catastrophic flooding in the city. They claimed that local New Orleans agencies forced the Corps to build an inferior system. Army Corps officials insisted that they originally wanted to build gates to keep floodwater from flowing into the heart of the city through its drainage canals. The Corps claimed the Gates Plan was the superior solution to protect the city, but they said local officials of the levee boards and sewage and water boards blocked that plan, and so the Corps went with the next fallback plan of building flood walls in the canals. Those walls fell over during Katrina when the water was still more than 4 feet from the tops. There are 3 smoking guns that shoot holes in the Corps of Engineers' claims and their attempts to shift the blame. Smoking gun number 1. The Corps offered 2 options to stormproof the 17th Street and the London Avenue drainage canals. A Gates plan with no pumps, like those in place today, or raising the height of the canal walls. The Corps, at the time, thought both plans were perfectly good, but the Corps preferred the Gates-only plan because it was cheaper. A report from the 1980s reveals that it was cheaper by a factor of between 3 and 5. The Corps preferred the Gates and no pumps plan because it was cheaper, not because it was better. Smoking gun number 2. The Orleans Levee Board preferred the more expensive, higher canal walls for the drainage canals. So, in full transparency, the Orleans Levee Board, backed by just about everyone, went to the state congressional delegation in September of 1990 for authorization of the more expensive plan to raise the canal walls. They did this because the Orleans Levee Board was convinced the Corps' cheaper Gates-only plan was an inferior plan and would end up flooding people. They received authorization, and Congress ordered the Corps to raise the canal walls, the more expensive plan. The Orleans Levee Board went to their congressional delegation to achieve the more expensive plan because they believed it was the better plan, not to save money as the Corps would have preferred. Smoking gun number 3. The 17th Street and London Avenue canal walls fell over during Katrina, flooded the city, and killed hundreds. For the Corps to pass the buck and say the failed canal walls is the fault of local agencies is based on an assumption that the Corps could have built the complex gates correctly. There were 50 breaches in the Corps levee system. If the Corps could not build simple levees that could stand, why do we think they could have built complex gates that would have worked? The canal walls didn't fall because it was the wrong plan. They fell because the Corps failed to drive the walls' steel sheet pilings down to a proper depth. With nothing to document the Corps' claims, the group, levees.org, decided to ask the Corps directly for proof. After all, the burden of proof should not lie with the victims, but with those making the claims. Now, in a written response to a records request, the Corps of Engineers admits that it cannot find any data to support their claims. It is not possible to determine exactly which documents were relied upon, considered, reviewed, read, or discussed. This evidence speaks for itself. The Corps cannot produce the data to support its claims because it does not exist. And listen to this. Levees.org offered the Corps of Engineers' letter to the New Orleans Times-Picayune as an exclusive story. A reporter for the Times-Picayune accepted the exclusive. He contacted the now-retired Lt Gen Carl Strock, who was the top Corps commander in the flood's aftermath, and asked him if he had the data or documents to support his claims. Throughout our response to Katrina, I emphasized how critical it was to be transparent and honest if we were to regain the trust of the public, he said. I might have illustrated my description with things I had heard but not personally researched, but there was absolutely no intent to deceive anyone. Keep in mind, this was the top commander for the Corps who reports directly to the Secretary of Defense. In other words, the commander is no hack. The bottom line here is this. The Corps of Engineers attempt to cast blame on local agencies, and ultimately the people of New Orleans, for the failures of the drainage canal walls is both deceptive and shameful. The engineering failures of those newly raised canal walls lie with the Corps and the Corps alone. and attempting to protect the Corps' image by shifting the blame serves no one, not even the Corps of Engineers.